What's shakin'? Hey, I'm Rick Jordan, and today we're going all in. I'm pumped. So as long as you're ready to go, I think I'm ready to go too. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's do it. All right. Well, here we are. We don't really do introductions or anything like that. Everything's going to be in the show notes. So we're here. We're talking, which is awesome. By the way, I love hosting for other podcasts hosts, because the conversations are so much more fluid. It's fantastic. We know how to talk, don't we, Jeannette?
I think we could give each other a good run for our money.
I like that.
We can both talk very well.
For sure. I was just on your show, which was absolutely fantastic. Give everybody the name of your show. I'm going to trip up the words.
Brilliant.
Brave, bold, and brilliant. Brilliant. Yes. Yep. Phenomenal show, everyone. You need to check out Jeanette's show. Yeah, I would have started with bold and brilliant and brave. I would have, but it's brave, bold, and brilliant. Phenomenal. We had a good conversation. We really did.
We did have a great conversation. We went in lots of different directions, which is always nice when we have these kind of fluid, open chats, right?
I know. What was interesting today, because I'm heading out to lunch with my daughter here in a little bit, and you were on a 5-hour train ride. Where were you coming from?
Well, this is the UK for you, right? Yeah. So this is coming from the northwest of England, Manchester, where I grew up as a child, and right the way down to the south coast of Wales, in a place called Caswell, where we live on a beautiful beach here. And but it's a long train journey. It's like going through the valleys of Wales. It takes a long time, but I'm home now and I'm raring to go.
That's incredible. I didn't know you lived in Wales. My family comes from Wales.
It's a small world. We split our time between our home here in Wales and our home in London, to be fair. So it's a bit of city, bit of beach. That's we like.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. My family, from what I can see anyways, because last name's Jordan, which is a very Irish name, went from Ireland, hundreds of years ago to Wales, and then from Wales came over to the States. My grandmother was on my dad's side was born here in the States, but her older sister was born in Wales. So I'm not too far removed generationally from the homeland, so to speak.
Fantastic. Well, yes. And I wonder which part of Wales. Maybe when you come over, Rick, we could find, lost family and all of that kind of thing.
That would be fun. And drink a lot of whiskey too, please. I think that's where my love for Macallan. I know Macallan is obviously, within the UK, right? It's in Scotland, but still, I absolutely love Scotch. So I'm sure that's where those roots come from.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, right on. So I didn't know the UK before we get into you, because I want to talk a lot about you, but I didn't know the UK was really that long, because I'm thinking, I'm from Chicago, and to drive, or take a train from Chicago to, let's say, St. Louis, Missouri, is about 5.5 hours. Yeah. So it's kind of like this state of Illinois is the same length, at least, as the UK. I had no idea.
Yeah. You've got massive distances in the States, haven't you? We're relatively small, but we are an island. So, that's the thing. So we do normally have to fly somewhere to get out of here, or we're doing the channel, the train and the Star and all of that. But no, it's not got the best transport system necessarily. So patience, but I worked all the way on the train. So this was good. It's good use of time.
That's awesome. It was. Yeah. When I was in Switzerland a few weeks ago, a 2.5 hour train ride from Zurich to Davos. It was just working the entire way, not quite. It's 5 hours, but it does intrigue me, because here's a business question for you, because you've got a huge background in business. Just 30 plus years in global leadership. I've got a nice form here that my team fills out. I was like, every bullet point, I'm scrolling down here, I'm like, holy moly, Jeannette, you're a badass. Seriously, 30 years in global leadership, across different industries like travel, right? And you had a career as a government economist in Whitehall, which is incredible to me. So this is the basis of my question, was this, I was surprised, because as much as I've been in business, this was actually my first time to the EU ever. I just never made it over there. So when I was there, there were some things that were very, very different to me. So when I would look down, I've got a photo on that I took. I went to a tiny little coffee shop, and I'll have to find it here, but it was pretty much like a morphing. Yeah, here it is. I mean, you can probably see it here. I'll just hold it up. A magazine that was a blend between Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And I mean, look at that. It's kind of creepy, when you see it. But I just sat down. I mean, it was at this bar at a beautiful, brilliant coffee shop, in the midst of Davos. And I saw this. I'm like, that is so interesting. And then talking with individual people, how, if I've got a new friend from Romania, he was trying to get me to see him over there. But the difference is in how the EU views the U.S. versus how us inside the U.S. view ourselves. It was mind blowing to me. And then when we talk about business too, however, everybody over in the EU, I don't know if the same with the UK, but everybody over in the EU loves putting their money into U.S. companies versus European companies. So as somebody who is a career government economist, can you shed some light on all of those just epiphanies that I had?
Well, I wasn't with you for your epiphanies, Rick, so I'm sure there were many by the sounds of it.
For sure.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's perception and there's reality in anything, whether that's in business or in life, right?
Yep.
And I think depending who you're talking to will probably influence their appetite for risk, their perception of where is it safe to place your money or not, as the case may be. And actually, if you look at the UK, this economy is driven by SME businesses. It's not the big corporates. It's sole traders, entrepreneurs, startup businesses, etc. So, I think it does vary quite significantly. But I guess there's a perception, isn't there, around scale, around growth. Around being business minded, if you like. So I think there's definitely a perception that maybe that's where, US companies are potentially seen as being safe, secure, large, etc. But, underneath all of that, of course, there's a political shift as well.
For sure there is. Yeah. Well, just look at, you're talking about the large corporations. I had no idea that the conversation would go this way, but it's interesting to me. So we'll keep going. You are intelligent when it comes to this, and I just want to suck out your brain today on this stuff, because we've got $1 trillion companies in the U.S., right? Apple, Tesla, and those are companies that size just does not exist anywhere else in the world. But to your point, and the magazine cover that I just showed you, the political undertides, of these things, and now we have Elon Musk, who is in the White House, who is running pretty much a huge mass firing, which is so interesting. And then we also have of Apple, we had Tim Cook, and then of course, let's talk about Meta too, right? Facebook, Instagram, Meta. Frickin' Zuckerberg was at the inauguration along with Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk. Everybody almost like showed up at Mar-a-Lago. And I want your take on this, at least maybe if you can speak for the entire European Union for me today. You're the representative today, okay? It's it was almost like paying homage to the new King of England. Is when they showed up in Mar-a-Lago prior to the inauguration. Between the time he was elected and when he actually was installed into office. It was so intriguing to me, so you hit on a huge point. What's the perception on that? Is that what everybody's watching over in the EU, the UK?
I think it's very divisive.
Interesting.
It's very divisive, and not wishing to kind of get into a political kind of debate, really.
Oh, no, this is more economy driven. Absolutely. Yeah. And politics does drive economy, right? It can. Of course it does.
Of course it does. So I think it is quite divisive around the politics, right? And it's the same with Brexit. When Brexit happened in the UK, the EU, I was absolutely devastated. It was the worst day in history as far as I was concerned, from a personal perspective and from my enjoyment of having a very culturally rich, diverse economy and population, and it was, for me, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this has happened, right? But the masses in the UK wanted to, make that choice. So, you respect it. We're a democracy at the end of the day. So I think when there are big shifts big political shifts, big economic shifts. It is divisive. And I think, this perception of the US superpower, big business, taking over the world, leading on the international stage has connotations, some people will be very supportive of that. And you've named some very high profile business leaders there that are clearly going, okay, this is my camp now. I want to be part of it.
They're flowing with the tide, right?
Exactly.
That's all it is. Yeah.
And then you'll have other people that will be like, oh my gosh, no, this is an absolute, I can't believe this is happening. Where's our sort of, open-mindedness to sort of diversity, equity, inclusion, etc. So, and I think that does drive the business choices as well and investments. So it's complicated, isn't it, Rick, at the end of the day?
It really is. Yeah. Because you could even argue like, Meta, a public company CEO here, right? I do have fiduciary responsibility to my shareholders of the company, right? So if you look at somebody like Zuckerberg or Bezos, right, I'll take those two and then I'll contrast and compare to Musk to get your thoughts on this. Like the where you're talking and what I'm agreeing with is that they are going with the flow, so to speak, right? So it would be bad for them. Just like if you listen to Zuckerberg on Rogan's show the past couple of weeks, if you haven't yet, it's an incredible interview, because at that time, just like you're saying, almost how like the masses, right, in the UK said, we want Brexit, right? It was kind of like the masses, his shareholders at the time were saying, we want content moderation. Yeah. So now he's realizing in hindsight, it's like, wait a second, maybe that wasn't so right. However, he's not being as bold to say, well, the political tides shifted and I need to be aligned. My shareholders want me to be aligned in the best possible way so that our stock price still is healthy. It absolutely is. Now, I don't see him or Bezos like going against the flow. Whereas for the history of Elon Musk and Tesla, it's always been go against the flow.
Yeah, disruptive.
Exactly. Yeah. But now I almost think that it's like he's found an ally and now it's kind of like going with the flow. But still, it's a shit, in some ways, because it's like, don't think for a second that the shareholders of Tesla are not going to benefit by his position in the US government or Starlink or SpaceX. It's the dude's brilliant. Seriously. Like I try to be objective when I look at these things, and I'm sure, hopefully you do too. I think you do. I mean, you were an economist for so many years, right? So do you see it the same way? Is that, or do you have I'd love to hear it, even if it's a contrasting opinion.
Yeah, I think, when you're running those huge, listed businesses, you've got all different stakeholders to manage, right? You've got the political arena, you've got the shareholders, you've got the financial institutions, the pension funds, it's a lot of pressure, right? And it all plays out very publicly. I mean, that's the difference, because if you're not a listed business, I mean, you know very well about this yourself from your own experience. If you're not a listed business, you can make very different choices behind closed doors to a certain degree. Yes, you have to have your accounts, etc., visible if you're a limited company. But apart from that, you can make much bolder, longer term decisions than when you're influenced by the share price and your market cap. So I think I agree with you that it's how risky do you want to be? How far do you stray from the masses? And I think at the moment, those businesses are backing a horse because there's a clear winner at this point of time. But that tide could shift, in the future. And I guess the question I would have is around the disruptive nature of those businesses from where they started and the values of which those founders started. Right on. How far removed is that now from the huge corporate conglomeration that they are? So it's quite interesting. And then you start to say, well, how will customers react? How will employees react around being part of this mass machine? Maybe there starts to become some tension over time where people go, well, I'm not quite sure this is what I signed up for. I joined a tech business that was edgy and innovative and pushed the boundaries and was trying stuff. And now all of a sudden we're seeing this kind of conformity and a lack of diversity of voices possibly.
No joke, I hear you.
That's my perspective, right or wrong, who knows?
No, I love it. I love these kinds of conversations. I mean, as a human too, you are absolutely incredible and, brilliant mind, attractive, And I love the stimulating conversation, seriously, because I don't think there's many that have these types of high level conversations. And you break it down so wonderfully too, where everyone can understand. It's phenomenal. Yeah, it's to your point, it's almost how you've grown into this corporate conglomerate, this massive thing. I remember on the topic of Musk, and then we'll get off him for a while because this is the bookend to Musk today. I'm a fan and an admirer of how he builds business and scales. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, that is just my opinion because he's brilliant when it comes to that.
Yes.
It was almost like the same opinion I have of Donald Trump from years ago. It's like, I think he did amazing things for the economy in his first term, some awesome things in the US. And just like Elon, it's like, sometimes it's like, come on, man, just keep your mouth shut once and you'll be better. It's like, because it's like the ego just kind of overflows sometimes, which we all have that problem on occasion, right?
We do. But we also have a moral responsibility to lead a business in a certain way as well, right? And to do the right thing as well as just making money. And I think that's often where tension comes in these situations that we're facing right now. And, there are some pretty alarming things, being happening and being said that from a diversity, equity, inclusion, is concerning.
It's intriguing. Yeah. I mean, a lot of if X, for an example, because massive layoffs, because obviously the US is going through that right now with the government, right? I tweeted the other day, I was like, does anybody not remember the Clinton administration? Because we're not even to his number yet, which was, I think, 426,000, just a little over that were fired from government positions during the Clinton administration. And he ran on, so you talk about like moral responsibility, right? He ran on, now historically, I'll just put it out there. Historically, I've been a Republican. However, I also look back at the Democratic Party from old, like John F. Kennedy. It's like totally different from Democrats today. It's like I almost resonate a lot with what he believed in way back then, but the Bill Clinton himself, talk about economy. He ran on the premise of, I'm going to balance the budget. I'm going to cut spending, and from a business perspective, what do you think, Jeannette? I mean, I've always seen it's like your largest expense. I learned this working at McDonald's. Your largest expense is payroll.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that?
Well, I think, the issue that you often find with, in politics and in government is that there are very few people in those positions that have actually ran a business.
Truth.
So by definition,
you are making a brilliant statement.
No, but just simple, even like home economics. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How much you've got coming in terms of your income and how much you've got going out on your bills. I mean, this is basic stuff, right?
You would think.
Yeah, you would think, cash flow, the cost of financing, the cost of debt. You have to, in a business, you have to run a lean operation. Every single, overhead that you're spending needs to be generating revenue or at least be leading you towards a longer term strategic goal, right?
For sure.
And, you have to, cash is king, as we all know. Cash flow is important. You need to be making money. You need a long-term vision as well as being able to deliver, the day-to-day operations. You're always making this constant adjustment. And I think the ability to be agile is very difficult in government because, quite frankly, most people are thinking about, will I get in for the next term? As opposed to doing the right thing that might be the right thing that will pay back in 5 years' time or 6 years' time. Unfortunately, you get very short-term thinking. And that can also happen with CEOs in public listed businesses as well, right? Yeah. Because the average tenure of a CEO, 3 years, 4 years in those big companies, you actually need a long run at it to really make the right choices in the right way and drive the right values. So I think it's interesting, but that for me is the biggest disconnect. And it's not unique to the US, it's the same in the UK, that some of the policy decisions are so removed from the reality of what it's like to run a business. And, all of those decisions you have to make around taking on, hiring staff, firing staff, innovating, investing, return on investment, cost of capital, it just doesn't, those principles are missing in my opinion.
They just don't exist in a lot of places, right? Except the principle of the term limits. If you're, Vladimir Putin, I don't think he's worried about having his.
No, let's not go there, Rick. Let's not go there.
That was a joke.
All my years in Russia, I spent many years in Russia. So, yes, I got some grey hairs and wrinkles.
Did you? Wow. That's not on my sheet here, Jeannette. That you spent many years in Russia. What were you doing there?
Well, it was when I was at TUI, and I was the managing director of the emerging markets, and that incorporated at the time Russia, Ukraine, ironically. Okay. So I set TUI. So TUI, for anyone that doesn't know, is the largest leisure travel business globally. So I headed up the emerging markets. So it was the classic BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China. So I had the businesses in all of those markets. But one of the first markets that we went into to set up an outbound travel business, so Russian and Ukrainians traveling out of the country, were those two markets. So I spent probably 5 years in Moscow in Ukraine, joint venture partnership, acquired 3 businesses, rebranded, relaunched the market as TUI. Yeah, so it's a very, very tough business environment, in every way. But for me personally, in terms of leadership, it was when I probably grew the most, learned the most, took the most risk.
Oh yeah, you were stretched beyond anything else you've done.
Yeah, so it was cool. And then I spent a lot of time in China, India, running the businesses over there. So yeah, I've got my fair share of grey hairs and wrinkles from my time in those markets, but hugely enjoyable and hugely stretching professionally. So yeah, but it's very sad to see what's happened in both of those places. It
is really for sure. On a political, geopolitical, personal level, it is
tragic.
It is. Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I think can possibly compared to that is the Holocaust during World War II. It's exactly. That amount of death. The world hasn't seen this, and it's like everybody's trying to prevent World War III. And I think that it's like, is it not happening right now? Because you've got all of these countries funneling support into Ukraine or by proxy, right? Or you have countries that are backing Russia by proxy. Yeah, exactly. They're just the front lines. That's it. Everyone else is kind of hanging back. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
But that's how things can shift very quickly, right? Especially in those parts of the world.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. We both have prayers that go out to everybody in those areas. So it gets me seriously. I mean, you interviewed me. It's human life, and the ability for people to make something of their life is something that's very important to me. And I know it is you too. That's why you have your show.
Mm. Yeah. And I think as business leaders, as well, with business, you alleviate poverty. You can create opportunities for people that they never would have had. You can make the world a better place, whether it's politics or business. And when you see the opposite of that, and the destruction of human life unnecessarily for power, and political gain, it's just, it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to see.
It is.
And stand back.
Yeah. We like seeing opportunities created and being a part of that creation process, don't we?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, the travel industry, where I spent most of my career, is such a joyful place. It accounts for 10% of global GDP. The industry, it's huge.
A lot of smiles put on faces from the travel industry.
Completely. And it's leisure, business, whether it's visiting friends and relatives, and it becomes such a culturally rich experience to travel the world and spend time in different countries or do business in different parts of the world. It's a real joy. So I feel very privileged to have ran businesses all over the world, and to have created huge jobs, economic benefit for those countries, but also for clients and customers that are traveling, to give them a joyful experience, right? How nice is that? Right?
That's incredible, for sure. So I'm gonna wrap it up with this. I mean, we've talked about so much today. You've been incredible. Thanks for indulging my own self-interest here, just in talking about the different views of the world. It's incredible. And I think we need more of this too. The dialogue is really what I think is important when it comes to leaders, when it comes to anybody else in the world, people that want to do something. And that's why we just talk about it openly. And we stayed away completely from politicalization of our conversation, which I think is also important, isn't it?
I think so, because you can, and you know, we live in a world where we should all be able to have our free thinking around what we believe in, and then it's how you carry yourself in your everyday life, and whether that's business or personal, that's really important. I think, what values do you stand by? Can you sleep at night?
Right on. Well, I think right there, everybody saw your heart, you know, as we talked about throughout the show. But you're incredible, Jeannette. I appreciate you. You are incredibly intelligent. Seriously. You know, it's like, I love these types of high-level conversations and how well you break it down. Thanks for coming on. This was amazing.
You are very welcome. It's always a pleasure and never a chore, Rick. Nice to see you.
That's a great phrase. Thanks.